All right, guys, we're gonna get started quick here. I hope I got enough battery for this. Good early Sunday morning. We've got the Han and Japan, Korea review here. While Rome was conquering the Mediterranean and creating Mare Nostrum, what is very rarely talked about is there is a sister empire over in Asia with Han Dynasty, China, and even down here in India, there's the Maurya and the Gupta dynasties, end of the Maurya, beginning of the Gupta. And while Rome is doing this large unified empire in the West, you know, the Han have recovered from the warring states and they're doing the same thing in the East. And the problem is with China is that many people were unhappy with the way that the Qin dynasty ended. It was that tough legalistic government, but the change that they created happened way too fast. Emperor Shi Huangdi and his harsh governmental system just didn't get it done. And so after Shi Huangdi dies, there is a period of what is known as the era of warring states, where not only do the people rebel, but so do the nobles. And eventually, the dynastic cycle comes around for the fourth time, and we get Liu Bang in 202 BC. Liu Bang will defeat 202 AD, right at the end of Pax Romana in Rome, for your comparison. Liu Bang defeats the rival armies, the other nobles, and creates what we know as the Han Dynasty. Now, Liu Bang will take 3 important steps as emperor, and his next 2 descendants follow suit. He's very shrewd about what he does. Number 1, he creates a strong centralized government. A government that will control the entire country, but only the large national problems. It was the same thing that the Qin dynasty did, but Liu Bang made it look different. He called it a different name. The framework was there. So let's use it, but let's make it less repressive. He lowered taxes on the people. People always like lower taxes. And he reduced those harsh, violent punishments that made the Qin dynasty so famous. And one of the other things he starts that his great descendant Han Wuti will perfect is he didn't pay for anything until he had the money for it. So he would wait and save and save and save, and then when they could pay for the road or the bridge or the maintenance fee or the canal, he would pay for it with cash. And he begins to rule through Confucian ideas. The bulk of his advisors at court were Confucian scholars. That's very important. So he rules through Confucianism rather than legalism. And it's his grandson, the great Han Wuti, that will set the namesake for this dynasty. Now, he was known as the martial emperor, martial meaning war, like think god of Mars. And he sets the hallmark or the trademark thereafter for all strong Chinese dynasties. When you have to expand the empire, you've got to make it bigger. Think of Rome puffing on that balloon after they salted the earth with Carthage. We are going to make the empire as big as we possibly can. And by the time he's done, he starts here, he gets the empire about as big as it was in modern day China. All right, roughly the size of the United States or a little more. And the social structure is, as it always is, with a couple subtle differences. At first, when he took over, you have the emperor on top. He is the god emperor. Next, you've got like the governors, some of the appointees that Han Wuti will set out to govern his empire. Then you've got like the state officials, the Confucian scholars, the nobles, kind of the intermediary guys. And then because they worked hard, the peasants are elevated above other groups. Peasants, the backbone of Chinese society, going out there and doing the hard work. Remember, devotion to duty, hard work. So their status is elevated higher than anywhere else. Doesn't mean they were doing okay. Doesn't mean they were wealthy. but social class-wise, they were seen as okay. Eventually, soldiers will go underneath them, and in the bottom, we have the merchants. Nobody liked the merchants because they were seen as being able to make money off of other people's work. They didn't really do anything except make money off of the hard work of other people. And then we have the slaves as per usual. Now, running an empire and an army this big was incredibly expensive. So the government had the people pay taxes, but they rotated it every 6 years. It's a debacle of a thing known as the equal field system, where you guys who are farming for 6 years will pay the taxes, and you other guys are going to do labor for the government for 6 years, and then we're going to rotate. The people paid taxes either in the crops that they grew or in their local products. Let's say you mine salt, or you mine coal, or you wove baskets. Well, you would pay taxes in the thing that you created or mined. If you were a fisherman, I guess somehow you would pay your taxes in the fish you caught, although it would be rather kind of smelly. Merchants usually paid their taxes in money, and they paid the bulk. Peasants were required to owe the government for a certain time of year a month's service, either in the military as a soldier or doing some type of labor. And it required a lot of record keeping and organization, which is what made the Confucian scholars so important. And so to do this, Han Wu-Ti, you see the kids in here taking an exam, will create the civil service test, where every government official had to go and take a test. Your score on it determined what job you got. The higher the score, the more important your job. If you got an okay score, you may be a city councilman in a tiny village. A pretty solid score, you could be a Confucian scholar at a good mid-sized town. A great score, you either help govern like in New York City, or maybe even advise the emperor directly. You had to understand Chinese history and law and literature. But not only did you have to have a good score, but a Confucian scholar had to give you a vote of confidence. They had to give you a recommendation. So I think in third period we used Luna here. So Luna passes the Confucian scholar exam. I think it might have been Anna in first period. And I say, okay, yeah, I think these two ladies will do a good job. If Anna or Luna screw up and they lose their job, I lose mine as well because I recommended them. So you don't want to give a job away to somebody who won't do it. It's the opposite of China, where they depended upon this good old boy network. And anybody could take it, but naturally, the wealthier you were, the more free time you had, the more you could pay for an education. So more often than not, it was the wealthy that got a chance to take the civil service exam. This system worked in China up until 1912 with the end of the last dynasty. A couple of the things the Chinese invent during the Han Dynasty, instead of writing everything on bamboo, which is good and durable, the complex record keeping of the equal field system, they needed something a lot faster. So using wood pulp, the Chinese invented paper. It was much cheaper and much quicker to produce, and it was available for everybody, especially to keep records, so it helped increase literacy somewhat. The biggest thing is in the shipbuilding technology. To travel the Pacific Ocean, part of the Indian Ocean, the Han Chinese ran some ropes or chains through the hull of the ship to the stern post rudder. And by flexing this rudder, turning it one way or the other, it gave the ship more stability. It helped turn it quicker than everybody getting on their oars and paddling their brains out. So there it is. The economy of the Han Dynasty makes them especially powerful. The economy was one of their strengths, especially because of the Great Silk Road that will leave the north and the south here, One road will branch up into Mongolia, the Russian steppes, meet again just north of India and what is today Afghanistan, Iran, and then go into Mesopotamia, all the way to Constantinople. So we're connecting the Eastern Roman Empire with the Pacific Ocean. The Trans-Saharan trade route will come in here and hook in as well. The southern route you can see tips into India. We get the Maurya Gupta empires involved. So we have trading across Eurasia, from Rome to the Pacific Ocean. Eventually a branch will go up into the Koreas, and we are going to have massive international trade. As a result, the Chinese population will grow to 60 million, the largest population in the world at the time, with the bulk of the cities being over here in the east. As a result, farming was made the most important and honored job. And Han Wuti will institute a thing known as the ever-level granaries, where throughout his empire he had silos filled full of food. And so if there was a famine or a natural disaster, they would go into those silos and the people would be able to eat. There was no way that they would starve anymore. And periodically these crops were rotated. He also perfected the policy of having the money on hand before you pay something. And he will build roads and bridges. And he will build canals linking the northern region with Xi'an. And then he said, we're going to maintain it. Remember we were talking about a building here with a petition going around and everything. It's much cheaper and easier to maintain than to neglect, which happened here for, at least 15 years of my career here, while we were just, the unwanted child, so we were just let go. So, the role of women. Women were supposed to live these quiet lives at home, pretty much just like everywhere else, and devote themselves to the family. But in the rural areas, the women were an essential part of the workforce. You needed all hands on deck to go out and help. So they worked on farms, outside with their husbands and their fathers and brothers and sons. Upper class women could be educated, and a very, very, very small number ran their own shops, usually like medicine or bookshops. And a few, kind of like Greece and Hippocrates, were able to practice medicine. The end of the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty will run from about 200 BC, and then it'll kind of collapse around, right around 8 BC. And there'll be a guy on the throne known as Wang Mang. And Wang Mang will do the best that he possibly can, and everything he tries doesn't work. So not only do they kill him, but they also eat him. It's a very terrible, horrible, tragic thing. And in 220 AD, from say 220 BC to 220 AD, I think I made a mistake at the beginning and said 220 AD, Pax Romana. Just as Pax Romana is ending, due to internal weaknesses, the empire falls apart and splits into 3 kingdoms. What had happened is governors way out on the far reaches of China stopped paying their taxes. And they said, if the emperor comes out here, I'll pay him, but chances are he's not going to come. We are going to maintain a bit of independence, while small farmers had to carry that burden. So many of them will sell their farms or give their land to one of these wealthy nobles in return for not having to pay taxes. Hey, I will work for you, I will become your serf, you protect me, and I don't have to pay taxes. And that's how Chinese feudalism developed. One of the other things that Han Wuti did that is so, I'm going to go back to this slide, so powerful, is he aggressively expanded down south to the west and to the east. But he went up after the Mongols, and he tried to exterminate them. And as he chases and hunts the Mongols across Asia, they head westward. And as they moved westward, they're like a snow plow, displacing and knocking apart other barbarian groups. So as they do so, we'll go back to this origin, as they do so, they push other barbarians, the Magyars, the Huns, the Vikings, the Ostrogoths, the Vandals, and they knock them into the Roman Empire, and it helped speed the decline of the Roman Empire. Cause was Han Muti going after the Mongols fleeing, attacking other barbarians. The effect is they helped bring about the collapse of the great Roman Empire. So that is a pretty much quick look at China. Again, I do want to do a quick comparison. In China, 202 BC to 2020 AD, there I am. We have a centralized government that displaced rival kingdoms, and they built a road system, and they built massive defensive walls, the Great Wall, the road system. Their sister empire is Rome. All right? Rome will displace the Etruscans and the Greeks and create a centralized republic where it is a thing of the people. Eventually, the republic will fall, and Rome will be dominated by an emperor or a Caesar. They will build roads. They will build defensive walls. Here's part of Hadrian's Wall on the Great Britain, Scottish, or the English and the Scottish border. They're mere images of each other at the opposite ends. One in Europe, one in Asia. I guess we'll call it Eurasia. The Han will conquer a diverse group of people around their territory, all bordering on China. The population of 60 million. And Chinese, the written language, will be instituted as a way to communicate. Over in the West, Rome conquers even more diverse people on 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And at its height, it controlled a population nearly as equal to China, but its territory was 2 times the size, 1.5 million square miles to 3.4. And while China was used as a unification, Latin, here you go, Brad Bratton Holmes, Latin was used as the official language to keep documents, but local groups still spoke their own language. The Roman Empire was so big, so diverse, they could not imprint their language on everybody else. The ongoing conflict with the nomads, the Xiongnu, and the expense maintaining the large army will cause the empire to fall apart, and it will be 300 years, almost 4, before the Sui and the Tang Dynasty will reunify China. Once Rome falls, it got simply too big. All right, they ran out of resources. They were an extractive economy. All those barbarians, here comes Attila the Hun being pushed by the Mongols, come into Rome, and the Roman Empire falls apart, never to be restored. Well, China will just kickstart the 5th dynastic cycle. So there, guys, is a quick look at China. Now we are going to go to Korea and Japan. In Korea is going to be the bridge between China here and Japan right there. And Korea is going to borrow many of its ideas from what it sees in the filial piety sense as their older brother China. And location, geography is very important as it is this cultural bridge. It will be this bridge between Japan and China, but Korea will maintain its own identity. And Korea, just like Japan, are very similar to Greece. They are very mountainous, very rocky. It's very difficult to move around in there. You will see here February 8th during the Winter Olympics. And in the beginning, from 300 AD to 600 AD, between the fall of Rome and the Middle Ages, there are 3 dynasties competing for power. Up here in the north, what today would be North Korea, is the Koguro Kingdom. Down here in the south is the Pache Kingdom. They'll be very important in a minute. And the Silla Kingdom is over here in the southeast. And unlike China, who has 31 dynasties, and unlike Japan, which only has 1, Korea only has 3. The Silla, which is the first, the Kuro, and the longest lasting one, which is the Chosin. And Japan is an archipelago, about the size of the state of California. It is a chain of islands. And its geography, as you can see here, is super intense. Mountainous, mountainous, mountainous. So just like Greece, it was too difficult to travel overland. It'll be until between the 1853 and 1900 when it was easier to travel 50 miles inland in Japan. So the Japanese become expert sailors. And these different islands were a series of power struggles between clans or wees. Eventually, the Yamato family will ally with the Korean Pache kingdom, and the Paches will give them the secret to smelting and making iron. With stronger, more powerful weapons rather than like copper or bamboo sticks, the Yamato family will dominate and unite Japan. It is at this time, to corner the market, many Korean artisans, blacksmiths, tailors, cobblers, you name it, move from Korea to Japan, and they will eventually become the aristocratic leaders in Japan because they've got money. Now, the government and the religion are intertwined. The Yamato family will choose the sun as their symbol. Japan is the land of the rising sun. It is the most powerful visible object that we can see in the universe. And so, as a result, since they are living representations of the sun, the Yamato family is the only single dynasty in all of world history. It will start back at this time, and there's the Yamato still on the throne, but September 2nd, 1945, General Douglas MacArthur made Emperor Hirohito say that he was not a god, he was just a man. So 3 years ago. The main religion is known as Shintoism. It means the way of the gods. Just like everybody else, Japan is polytheistic. They worship the gods of nature. And to be powerful in Japan politically, your family had to claim an original ancestor, where you have this long, elaborate genealogy, and you want to choose something powerful. So like the Fujiwara family chose the biggest mountain in Japan, Mount Fuji. This volcano gave birth to them. And the more powerful your symbol of nature, Mount Fuji, a waterfall, the more important politically your family was. By the early 600s, the Japanese, through the Koreans, had learned about China, and in 600 they began to send their aristocratic young men abroad. And these young men are going to travel to China, and they're going to study government and language and technology. And they're going to bring it all back. It's an era of cultural diffusion. Most of this will take place during the great Tang Dynasty of China, where the students come back and they tell the Yamato family everything they've learned. The problem is, not all parts of Chinese ideas, especially their philosophy, fits Japan. So Japan is going to adapt and adopt and kind of work things out and finds out what they need. Everything will fill a specific immediate need. And one of the things they did like will be the concept of feudalism, having an emperor send out trusted agents to govern the large parts of his territory. And so Japanese history is known as where the capital was. So at first we have unification. Next we have the Nara period, where in 710 a new city is built that will be an identical twin, but smaller, of the Chinese Tang Dynasty capital. And here is where the Japanese are fundamentally different. In China, they have that civil service exam, and then the recommendation for Luna and Anna. But in Japan, that's not the way it was. It was a good old boy network. You who in a position of power gave your buddy's son a job. Right? So, since, I've known the Kamadas for a long time, Anna Grace gets a job. Caitlin and Anna will get a job. Aaron and Caitlin will get a job simply because I've known them longer than the rest of you. Doesn't matter if I like you, it doesn't matter, but I got to do it for my friends and family, so I'm going to give McLaughlin a job because that's the way it works. And the problem is you have so many guys doing the same job that the bureaucracy becomes top-heavy, becomes inefficient. And so the last Chinese delegation will return from China in 839. So the Japanese will spend the next 350 years taking and assimilating what they like and making it fit their needs. After this, we get the next period of Japanese history known as the Heian period. The Heian period is centered around present-day Tokyo. Once again, the cities are beautiful and the pagoda architecture, but it's a model of what we find in China. And here is where Japan will find that some of the things they're borrowing just doesn't work. Like Japan was trying that complicated equal field system, and that simply just didn't work. Land in Japan was hereditary, so we can't rotate people every 6 years. So taxes in Japan are once again collected in money or in your local products, what you mined or made or produced locally. It could be food, it could be clothes, it could be ironworks, it could be boats, but you paid taxes in what you locally produced, what you grew, or your labor. The wealthy could pay them, but the poor could not. So just like in China, the poor peasants will begin working for their strong local leader, a daimyo. Hey brother, can you spare me a daimyo? And these daimyos absorb these peasants and build kind of tiny little armies. This will be a mirror image of the feudal system that we see in Europe. They're identical pretty much, except in Japan it lasts a lot longer, unless you're in China, or in Russia, excuse me. Now, social structure. You have the emperor. He is the symbolic head of the empire. He is a living representation of the sun. He's at the top of Japanese society, but after a while, a lot of these emperors won't want to do the hard work, and they'll let an assistant do that, and they became a figurehead. They're always there, they just don't do much. That gives rise to the shogun, the chief military officer who actually carries out the executive function of the government. He will take his loyal officers and make them daimyos, large landowners. You're going to control this quadrant, Anna Grace. Back there, we're going to get Big Joe. Up here, we're going to get Hannah and Anna. And over here, we're going to give it to Kenzie. Now you guys are answering to me. I'm on top, you're my assistants. You also have subordinates that help you control the land called samurai. Samurai are nobles, but they are warriors and policemen. They don't have to pay taxes as long as they serve, hence the name one who serves. And so it's the peasants, the 80–90% of society that will do the work for everybody else. Farmers, artisans, merchants, they do all the labor for the samurai, for the daimyo, and for the shogun. Theoretically, everybody works for the emperor, who is unchallenged. Very different from China, who sometimes had a lot of tension with his bureaucracy. Like even Han Wuti went through the salt and the iron debates over whether or not he was allowed to keep his monopolies on copper, on salt, on liquor, and, oh my God, I forget the other one. I think iron. Yes, hence salt and iron debates. Salt, iron, copper, and liquor, things that everybody needs or wants. In Japan, there was never any of that tension. By the late Heian period, just like in China, the daimyo, remember proximity to authority, they begin acting independently. And they have all these warriors who are training to fight, so man, these guys want to fight. And during this time, the Fujiwara family will take advantage of some of this chaos by marrying their daughters with Yamato family sons. A very nifty little technique to get the key positions of power. Eventually, a young emperor named Shirakawa will kick them out. He's very similar to Augustus Caesar. He will rule by himself, and then he will bring his son and train his son how to succeed him. And the more vocal his son gets, the more Shirakawa recedes. So there he is right there. Japanese literature is interesting. The Japanese were using the Chinese writing system, but there were Chinese verbal expressions that they couldn't say in Chinese. So in 951, the Empress Amida, she is responsible for creating the Japanese language. She brings in her court scholars and says, guys, I want to write poetry in my own language. Create me a writing system in Japanese. How incredibly hard that must have been. But they do it. And this allows, say, Shogun to write the Pillow Book, a satirical description of her life at court as an aristocratic young woman, but it was just very boring, and she was like a concubine. And Lady Mary Saki Shikibu writes the tale of Genji, about a young prince at court and his successes and his failures and his loves, and things that he loved but he knew could never be. By 1185, there is very little trace of anything resembling Chinese government. Nara and Heian is when most of the stuff was borrowed. By this point, Japan switches from a civilian-run government to a civil aristocracy to a military-run government. And that starts with, who is it? Minamoto Yoritomo. There we go. All right. He is the first shogun. And he says things have gotten way too complex and complicated, so he streamlines government into 3 bureaucratic offices. 3 people he can meet with every day. And when Japan gets into trouble from this point on, they return to these 3 offices over and over and over again. First one, he creates the office of the samurai. Who can become a samurai and who can't. And if the oldest son becomes a samurai, then we got to find jobs for the other 2 so things aren't going to be a problem. Second is the office of administration. People to record and to execute the laws. Make sure they are being carried out. And in last place, we have the legal or judicial branch. Someone to hear court cases and make rulings. Give the ruling to the Office of Administration, and they will get it done. And so that's how Japan runs for many years. After Minamoto Yoritomo dies, the things he set in place just keep working. So Japan will go on cruise control. They believe they have perfected the best society in the world. So as Europe comes out of their dark ages, Japan kind of falls into theirs. There's a brief bit of trouble when Kublai Khan will launch 2 invasions. The great Mongol leader had subjected the Song Dynasty. He had conquered everywhere else but Japan. So he launches an invasion in 1274. And a hurricane or kamikaze destroys them. So he tries again 6-7 years later in 1281. And the people believe the emperor, like Aang the waterbender, went down, did some of this stuff, caused the hurricane, and both Mongol invasions will fail. And that's when the Japanese people believe they are divine. Their emperor has taken care of them. He has made sure they would not get invaded. So they are the chosen people. And this brings us to the Ashikaga era. When a young emperor wanted to reassert his authority, the shogun sent his best samurai, Ashikaga, to go put the emperor in his place. Ashikaga says, man, I don't know how to do that to a divine emperor. So instead of fighting the emperor, he works with him and becomes the next shogun. And Ashikaga uses Yoritomo's ideas to fix Japan. If it worked, Why are we trying to tamper with it? It's not broke, don't fix it. So Japanese history becomes cyclical. They will rise, they will plateau, and then they will have some trouble. They'll go right back to Yoritomo's ideas and keep on going until the 1850s when Commodore Perry shows up. In between, there was a small bit of outside intervention with Dutch traders and Jesuit missionaries, but very, very, very small. One of the things that he does is he allows skilled artisans who are only supplying goods to the emperor to sell things for profit. And this is where families, samurai families like the Hondas and the Toyotas capitalize. They will recruit skilled artisans, and then when they give the emperor what he wants, they can sell the rest on the open market and make a bunch of money. So they were not only powerful militarily, but powerful economically, which is why they are multinational corporations today. It is at this point where Japan will enter their 6 or 7 year period, dark ages, just like Europe, who will not, reattach itself to the world, to the Crusades. The Japanese will stay secluded until Commodore Perry in 1853. They believe they have perfected civilization, so why worry about anything else? One of the last things that they do is during this time they come up with no plays, which are very similar to Greek tragedies, and they have a story. Some of them are fairy tales, some of them are fantasy, some about the conquest of Minamoto Yoritomo, but many teach a moral lesson, like the fisherman and the fish, or the fisherman's wife and the fish. And eventually they stopped being spoken, and it was an elaborate dance. It was kind of like a sign language for entertainment. All right, guys, that's it. Please watch these, and we're on for Friday, around 40, 45 questions or so. All right, Melega out.